bit rushed because I went to Chap Mikveh on my way to work. So that's why I ended off that last video a little abruptly. So now I have another few minutes, although something I like to listen to on the radio, about 15 minutes. So I'll try to keep it to 15 minutes or less. It might not be so easy because I always like to talk a lot. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about this missionary issue. Now, first of all, I mean, I said before, how do I balance this, Jeffersonian libertarian ideal of freedom of religion? It's not even, I certainly believe that for my safety, I had a discussion about this at shul over Shabbos. So there was one fellow who was from South Africa, and we were discussing the difference between the American approach and the European model, which is what Israel follows, to religion. I mean, the American approach to religion is total freedom of religion, absolute, total, liberal, authentic, classical, liberal, Jeffersonian freedom of religion, which is neither the French or Turkish total secularism, and neither the classical European, which you find in England or in Germany and Israel. These countries, classical European, tolerance of religion under a government model where the government helps to fund the religion. In America, there are certain things that the government will fund. The government will fund secular things for religious places. For example, a school bus to go to a religious school that also provides secular studies. In New York and in many states, the same thing is, or if they give these all equally without any discrimination. Like in Virginia, you have school vouchers, and all private schools, whether religious or secular, receive these same vouchers, things like that. How do we balance that as opposed to, I know best of Israel, where there's the Misrada Datot, which is something that, I remember Samarov was very upset that Aguda was seeking a seat in the Misrada Datot. Respectfully so, but, he understood there's different, and he understood why they want to be in there, but he also explained why it's inappropriate. But even in America, which is essentially a free country, you do have different aspects of how religion is sponsored by the state. One is, chaplains are in federal positions such as prisons, military, VA hospitals. You have chaplains, which are government employees, and but there are rules of chaplaincy, and the same thing is in state prisons and hospitals in most states. The only state that I know of that doesn't hire chaplains is Virginia. In Virginia, chaplains are all privately funded, prison chaplains. So It's not the European model, and I was explaining why I feel the American model is superior to the European model, or preferable, because, like I said, freedom gives more opportunity, and also, in general, what I always say is that religion, the problem with religion is resting on its laurels. The problem why are churches and synagogues failing is they rest on their laurels. Especially Judaism in general, and the same thing is with any church that's particularly culturally bound, meaning many people, they identify as Catholics because they are Irish or Italian or Hispanic, as opposed to they really believe in it. It's more or less, that's part of our culture because of which country we came from in Europe or in, Latin America, and so, however, more and more in Latin America, the evangelical churches are becoming more popular because the Catholic Church rested on its laurels. They just assumed everybody here is Catholic by default. It's kind of like what the sociologists call in the Jewish community the residual Orthodox, meaning synagogues that are Orthodox not because the people who pray there are particularly religious, but because the synagogue has always been Orthodox and they're not going to change. And sometimes that residual Orthodoxy is detrimental to a community because, you look at certain communities where, I had applied at a position in Nairobi, Kenya. There's only one synagogue in the whole country. And it's a residually Orthodox congregation where I don't think there's anybody there, maybe one or two people who Shomer Shabbos, but the congregation is Orthodox because like we call residual Orthodox. And they asked me how would I approach that, and I would say we can't alienate the people who want this style, but we also have to be welcoming of those who want something else, and we can find a balance. We can have more than one service. We can have like what's the equivalent of in many Orthodox synagogues, the kiruv service, the beginner service. But that term kiruv or beginner is kind of condescending, so I wouldn't use that term, but a family service would probably be the term, which would be within the realm of halacha, but perhaps something that someone from a non-Orthodox background would feel more comfortable with, maybe English readings and more singing and, something a little bit maybe more spiritual and things like that. But as it is now, they just are stuck with this residual Orthodoxy, which in a way is good, in a way is detrimental. Like we said, it's alienated most of the community. On the other hand, sometimes, I served as assistant rabbi in a synagogue in Loch Sheldrake. That's where I first heard the term residual Orthodox. There was a book written about the synagogue, and they called it residual Orthodox, but eventually what took place in that community is that the synagogue-going Jews were all Orthodox, with very few exceptions. Maybe one or two people who were not totally observant, but also who they would really only feel comfortable in an Orthodox synagogue or a conservative synagogue. Traditional types. So, with that being said, it wound up being the best thing for that synagogue because by virtue of the fact that they remained Orthodox, they were able to be quite successful in what they were looking to do, as opposed to in our community in Kanyanga Lake. There was a synagogue that was Orthodox, was founded Orthodox, and decided to remove the Orthodox residue so to speak, and in doing so really has spelled their own doom. They're a very small, weak synagogue. Hopefully they're going to close down soon because they're not doing anything. They're not helping the community. They serve no purpose. And it would be much better off if that would be back as it was founded as Orthodox, because most of the synagogue-going Jews in town are alienated from a place like that, and it's really a tremendous waste. And they should really reinstate the Rav, who's the chief rabbi of the community to this day, because some people were wise enough to see what needed to be done, and that's what we see. But whatever, it's neither here nor there. But back to how do we balance, to be liberal without having false advertising. I always am interested in the New Jersey kosher law model. There's also New York kosher law, which is not as apparent as the New Jersey kosher law. If you walk into a kosher restaurant in New Jersey, there'll be a sign on the wall where there's like you check off different things. Does this place serve meat only, dairy only, or meat and dairy? Does this place serve pork? Does this place serve meat that was slaughtered kosher? Yes, no. Does this place serve shellfish? Does this establishment serve sturgeon? Sturgeon, that's a question, because some rabbis say sturgeon is kosher, but the general consensus is that it's not. So certainly a place could advertise as kosher and serve sturgeon, but it's a different standard, and people should be aware of what I'm upset is that they don't have Pas Yisrael and Cholav Yisrael and Glat, which they really should have, because then people should be aware of those things as well and have those things, that information available. But that being said, they can serve outright treif and call it kosher because the government can't define what is kosher, but they cannot declare pork to be kosher without telling you that they're declaring pork to be kosher, and then you, as an educated consumer, have to know that pork is not kosher. You know what I'm saying? And so the same thing with the Messianic Jews. We can't tell them not to call themselves Jews, even though we want to, even though according to halakha what they're teaching is not Judaism, and many of them are halakhically not Jewish. Most of them, the vast majority. But how do we balance that? And it's not easy. That's one part of the equation. But the other part of the equation is what I really spoke about in the last video, is that why is this a problem? It's because we should learn something from them. Not to be pushy and cultish, not that nonsense, which a lot of people in the Kiruv world do want to emulate, and it's really sick and wrong, and that's not the way they should be emulating. But on the other hand, just being welcoming, like a friend of mine, he says, we should welcome, he was showing a video of someone who had converted to Islam, and the imam was so proud and welcoming of this new convert that he had welcomed. And why don't we have that? I mean, in some places we do. I mean, I last week I sat in a Bezdin for a gear, and afterwards we sang Simon Tov and Mazel Tov, and you saw the look on this Geras's face, the Kedusha. We should celebrate that. We should, and I remember when in Or Sameach we had some of the students, they were Megayer, and they made a big Suda to celebrate it, and that's was Staff sign. We have to do that. I remember there was a young man. He lives in Brooklyn now. He grew up in Muncie. He's a police officer from now. He had his struggles in life. Grew up in a very frum home in Muncie, and he he was going around by the Sudan, and he said, Mirz Hashem by you, like you say, by a chasana, you go to somebody who, we always say, simchas by you, but like often, like, see someone looking for shidduch, and we pray and we wish them a blessing, at someone else's chasana, Mirz Hashem by you. That God willing, you should get married, or things like that. So he was going around by this party. Did we celebrate somebody became a ger, and he said, Mirz Hashem by you. I remember that. But that's not. But the thing is, the Pisetzner Rebbe, in his what's the name? He had they translate what they call to heal his soul. What do they call that? They I forget what not Savas. What he had a sefer that he wrote that was like his own personal diary. Pisetzner, and he's famous with the Eish Kodesh and the Chavos Talmidim. So the Pisetzner, he wrote when he turned 40 years old. He was a big Rebbe, a lot of Hasidim, and he said, I decided, on his 40th birthday, he decided he wants to become a Ger Tzedek. What do you mean he wants to become a Ger Tzedek? He wants to become a Yid, like the Yid Kodesh. They asked him why is he called the Yid Kodesh. He said because every day he feels like he just became a Yid, and that's how we should feel. We should strive. Like the question would be, you ask someone, who's Jewish, if you found out tomorrow that you weren't really Jewish, would you become a ger? And I remember Moshe Weinberger, he said one of his Talmidim found out he wasn't really Jewish, and he said, they were going to the next day bring him to mikveh and make him a ger, and he was frum, and then he said, and he came to the Rebbe's house, and he said, I got to stay at your house tonight because I'm too afraid. What am I going to do this one night that I'm not Jewish? And I could do whatever I want. I don't want to do it. He could. What would we do, in a situation like that? If we found out that we weren't really Jewish, would we even bother to convert? Would we just throw out the whole thing? And that's something we have to think about in life, seriously. And I think that's really why we have this problem, because we're not doing the mitzvah of you have to miss a ger. We're not welcoming to gerim. Why? Because we're not so happy with it ourselves, and we should be so happy. What a great gift Hashem gave us. We should be so joyous of what a tremendous gift we have of the Holy Torah, and instead we're not so happy about it, and so that's why we're not so happy to welcome others, which we should be. We should be so grateful. We should be so excited. Ashreinu ma'tev chalkeinu, and not in a negative way to put down others, but just to be proud of who we are. What the Gaul said, there's the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism is you're proud of your country and happy about your country. Nationalism is you putting down everybody else. And the Jewish community we should be patriotic and not nationalistic in the sense of what the Gaul said, and in other ways too. I remember hearing that Rav Soloveitchik, he said his Zionism. He said, "Ich bin a patriot." All right, I'm missing my show, but it's good. This is more important than listening to the Writer's Almanac. He said this hat gornit mit Mashiach. We should know that today they try to make a big yontiv about Yerushalayim, And even Rav Soloveitchik said that das hat gur nit mit Mashiach. I remember the brother Ruf told me that. He said J.V. Soloveitchik is gewesen an ehrliche Yid, is gewesen a voile Yid, is nicht gewesen kanzioni. The same thing, Meir Shiva, Chef Fushleima, Rabbi Brandspiegel, Fushleima, soll gesund sein. He needs a big refuah. He said, I remember both chief rabbis of Israel were there. It was a conference in Washington, D.C. And Meir Shiva was there, and he was speaking, and he said, "My Rebbe, Rabbi Yashaber, is nicht gewesen kanzioni, is gewesen a voile Yid." So that's why I went to learn by him and not in YU. You know, even though I probably would have a better job if I went to YU in Rabbanis or whatever. But I went to Lander College, and I'm happy I went. There's this spirit of nationalism that is really this de Gaulle type of how Charles de Gaulle defined nationalism. We really find this sickness in the Jewish community that has to be gotten rid of. We have to get rid of, like I said in the last video, this selfishness, this, meaning why. And I remember my yeshiva, Moshe Lazarus, he said, if your house is on fire and your neighbor's house on fire, you have to save your house first. Rahman al-San, it shouldn't happen to anybody. But he's saying a mashal. But if your house is okay and your neighbor's house on fire, you have to help your neighbor. It shouldn't happen to anybody. I'm talking a mashal. Ashri, mitorascha lamdenu, should be enough. We should learn Torah, and that should shouldn't be any fires in the Jewish homes. Shav Rachmanis on the whole world. But his point is, if you have a problem and your neighbor has a problem, you have to deal with your problem first. But if you don't have a problem, but your neighbor has a problem, you can help your neighbor. Chayecha kodim, means when it's mamish chayecha, So anyway, the point that I'm saying here is like this. By the way, to Gilad Simon, I'm driving through Monroe right now, and it's beautiful, clean. There's not a piece of garbage on the floor. He had to bring up, he had to follow a garbage truck, and I understand what Gilad Simon is doing, and I'm supportive to a certain extent, but back to what am I saying here? So back to what I'm saying. Why do we have this missionary problem? It's like I said in the other video. Yes, how it started, how were the seeds planted, were from the churches. And there has been this movement for a long time, but it was not successful. And now, there's this claim that it's much more successful, which I would tend to doubt. I don't think it's as successful. I mean, if you go to a standard church that calls itself a Messianic synagogue and see how many people there are actually Jewish, you're going to find it's very, very low number. It's definitely the minority in those places that are actually Jewish. And I don't think that most of the non-Jews who go there are going there for a nefarious purpose of trying to steal Jewish souls. I think they're authentically looking for the Hebrew roots of their faith and looking for emes, looking for truth. Even though their own faith warned against Judaizing, for classically. So So what's actually going on here? What's you know, we should understand it like that. That there are, and again, I don't mean it in an aggressive way, how the missionaries do, because the missionaries believe that everyone has to be Christian or has to believe in Jesus. We don't believe everyone has to be Jewish. That's not our belief. However, we do welcome Gerim, and we, authentic, honest, real Gerim, and we're supposed to encourage people to be authentic, honest, real Gerim. That's the Halach and Shulchan Aruch. Is that when you see somebody, everyone thinks you're supposed to push away a ger 3 times. That's not true. What it is you're supposed to explain to someone who wants to be a ger. It's a big responsibility. It's not always so easy. There's a lot involved in it. But it's worth it. It is worth it. It is good. It's not, it's not just all sad. It's not just all pain. It's a tremendously wonderful, good thing, and a schus to become a ger tzedek. It is, but it's something that you have to decide on your own to do, that no one can tell you to do. All right, have a wonderful day at school. I love you. All right, I'll get you on the bus, okay? Is it, maybe I have to unlock it? All right. Meaning, all right, I love you. See you later. Meaning you're not, do you need your briefcase? I love you. Meaning you're not obligated to become a ger tzedek, but it's a good thing. It's the best thing. Meir Sheshiva, Moshe Lazarus, he said that this Noahide movement is b'diavad at best, and maybe even damaging. Meaning, yes, we're very supportive of the Noahides. But the thing is it's much better. It's much, much better. 1,000,000 times better if someone believes in the Torah to become a ger tzedek. If you for some reason you can't, it's too difficult, you're stuck, you should still have it as a goal. Until then, all right, you keep Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, but really, it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be as hard, and it certainly shouldn't be discouraged. The Shulchan Aruch is very, very plain that you're supposed to encourage people who, when you see someone who really believes in the Torah and means l'shem shemayim, you're supposed to encourage them to become a ger, give them chizik, and we don't do that. And the thing is that you have people who, they want to, they want to find out about Yiddishkeit. They want to be Jewish, and we discourage them, and they wind up going to the missionaries. I mean, I remember hearing Chacham Ovadia Yosef at the same conference where my yeshiva was speaking. They had it was a conference on gerus, and quite a empty one, to say the least. Maybe worse than that, but it was nice fellowship time and good food and a comfortable fancy hotel and stuff. So the Gashmis was good there. there was a, like I'm saying, at this conference, they had a live hookup to Chacham Avadia, and he said, I remember seeing Avadia in person. He said that like a few people said the same thing, but like he said, we know the Medrash that Timnah wanted to be Jewish, and they pushed her away. Avram Avinu pushed her away, so she went to Esav, and the way Chacham Avadia said, "You are reformi," he said he made a reform conversion, going to Esau, and then from there came Amalek. But it's worse than that, because most people who really want to be Gerim and are pushed away, they don't wind up by the reform, which is Halbut Surah, but they wind up going to Esav. They wind up by these missionary groups, and then they wind up being missionaries who are running after Jews. Although the Reform are doing the same thing, they're probably worse, to a certain extent. Not all Reform, but the Reform that are anti-religious, anti-basic family values, and not only anti it, but like pushing it in a perverted way. I'm not talking about someone who just wants to sit with his wife in the synagogue and read in English. That's not the end of the world, but the kind of extreme leftism that's come into the Reform world it comes from the Sabbatean Frankist groups. There's someone on Twitter who's talking a lot about that, and he's bringing his evidence for it, and that's been damaging not just to the Jewish world but to the world at large. And he really encourages to have unity with the Christian world over this, which I also agree. And that's why I'm differentiating between. I don't even want to step on the toes of people who, even you listen to some of these messianics and who are beacons of light for their community, for the Christian community, for the non-Jewish community. Yeah, they're running after Jews, but they're not that successful with the Jews. But they're, I can think of one person in particular. He was a hippie on drugs, and now he's a very Jewish kid, and he grew up in a conservative Jewish home, but not that serious as most of the conservative, are not really that serious. A real serious conservative Jewish scholar is we could say a chinuata, but that's not the average balabas, but this fellow, he was on drugs, a hippie, wasting his life, and now he's teaching ethics and morals and really bringing good things to the Christian world and to the secular world. But because he grew up Jewish, it's a detriment that he's pushing this whole, he's trying to missionize the Jews. But other than that, he's a person we could have tremendous fellowship with if he would just drop the whole Jewish thing. I'm honest about that. I mean, of course it'd be better if he'd be a frum Jew. If he says he's Jewish, whatever, that would be the best thing. We got to be realistic. It would be just, I think, if he would drop, if he would recognize, he's so devout in Christianity, he should just forget about this whole Jewish thing and just, be Christian and forget about calling himself Jewish and all that stuff. But it is what it is. Especially since a lot of his ideas, even from a Christian perspective, are, I would say, somewhat heretical about, the authenticity of Scripture and things that he's mentioned, and a lot of the things he says, and I think his obsession to try to fit Judaism and Christianity together has been his detriment and to his own spiritual growth as well. But he could do tremendous things, and he has done. But this missionary work has been a detriment in all, and it's his big weakness. But I mean, we've suggested perhaps we would have a public debate, and I would want to suggest to him that he should just drop the whole Jewish thing and just totally embrace his Christian side and forget about the Jewish side and just leave that aside, and then we can have fellowship just as people who believe in the Bible. I'm an Orthodox Jew and he's a Christian, but this whole thing that he has to try to fit Judaism and Christianity together is just, it's pretty vain and a waste of time and whatever. Now, on the other hand, there are many, and in a way, Gullus helps us get rid of the bad Jews and bring in the good Goyim, the good Gentiles, who will become good Jews, And so, like, if he would have just totally assimilated and forgotten about being Jewish, he would be a great Christian, And we don't need to, it's not our job. We don't have bias on every Jew. It's not our job to save his soul, and not everyone born Jewish has a Jewish soul, Rabbi Yitzchak Ma'ako says. And so this fellow, this big missionary guy, this pastor, he would be, at least he never calls himself rabbi, he calls himself doctor, which he has a PhD, but people know who I'm talking about now. I was on his radio show a few times. But he would be much better off just being a total goy and forgetting about this whole Jewish thing, this whole Jewish obsession that he has. But perhaps it's because his neshama is calling him back that he should really be Jewish. But you can't have it both ways, and that's his struggle in life, and that's what he's dealing with. But so he, he sent me one of his books, and I read it, and it's just so silly, the argument that he has at the end that, well, if there's no good reason not to, then there's no good reason not to, which is just a very weak argument, whatever, logically speaking, or whatever it is. All right, it's neither here nor there. It's not really time to discuss that. But that all being said, we can recognize, in a libertarian world, that there are different religions. This trip that the president took now is so inspiring. He should make his first trip, and the order that he put it in, because usually you would think the order should be Christianity, Judaism, Islam. The order should be Judaism, Christianity, Islam, because Judaism is first, Christianity is second, Islam is third. Go in chronological order of their history, and yet he went first to the center of Islam, the country that holds Mecca and Medina, and then he went to a place that he understands. Of course, it's the Holy Land of the Jewish people, of the Jewish faith, but also Holy Land of others, and the roots, of these other religions as well, in a certain sense. This guy's really on my back. I don't know. He should. So I'm too close to this next guy. So, but hands free. I'm not even looking at the camera. So they, the fact that he flew from Saudi Arabia to Israel, that's the first time in history that there was a direct flight from Saudi Arabia to Israel. And someone said, well, I told my Rav that, and he said, well, what do they usually do? I was like, who's going from Saudi Arabia to Israel? All right, and then, but also his recognition, I think it was more of what's the most important hotbed to deal with? What's the second most important? And then just to go to Rome, all right, I covered the Jews and the Muslims, I have to go, well, to the Catholics. It's not all of Christendom, although certainly the Protestants and really the Eastern churches also, in a sense, broke away from the Roman Church. So whatever it is, but it was a phenomenal trip, and just and how anyone can criticize this Alan Chartak, again, whatever it is. But back to what I was saying, what's the point of my speech here? What am I talking about? 40 minutes already. Wow. Again, like I said yesterday, I can't imagine, yesterday I made a video that seemed like it took forever, and it was only 15 minutes, 17 minutes, whatever. Maybe it was 20 minutes by the time I was done. And now I feel like I've been talking for 5-10 minutes. I've been talking for 40 minutes. But now with hands-free. So I'm probably going to make a lot more videos now that I'm hands-free. But again, I'm not saying this to be against Christianity, because really we should be teaming up. Orthodox Jews and Christians should be teaming up against this really the Sabbatean threat, the Sabbatean Frankist Marxist threat. Freudian could throw in there also. And this one author, he points out how the connections that Louis Brandeis had to the Frankist communities, and how the Supreme Court has been essentially, Jefferson warned about the potential of the Supreme Court becoming a tyrannical oligarchy of the judiciary, and really how it's became a Frankist oligarchy. And now that answers the question that I had all throughout the confirmation hearings of Justice Gorsuch. Why, of all people, is Chuck Schumer fighting against Gorsuch? And the chutzpah that he had to go to Satmar, and he says, my name's Schumer, which means Shomer, I'm your Shomer. I made a hashtag, not my Shomer. You're not my Shomer, Chuck Schumer. And the thing is that it's back into what he's trying to undermine and uproot our culture and our faith, because he's probably also one of those Frankists. I mean, like I said in the tweet, I said, look at the kind of schmutz his niece is involved with, and I said better not to look at it. And I don't know too much about, but I heard some things here and there were disgusting, undermining just all the basic values that this is. And Comedy Central used to have Mystery Science Theater 3000, and now it's just like the lowest, basest, most disgusting things. I don't watch it. I never saw Amy Schumer's show, but like it must be like this fellow on Twitter. He says the Frankists they have their dynasties, and there are Sabbatean and Frankist dynasties, what he claims, and it must be that the Schumers were involved, even though he says he came from Chortkov. I mean, how did they got in there in Chortkov, and that he was a Shomer here? I don't know. I'll have to look into that, because there's something strange about it. But because Chortkov was a shameless Seferis with Malchus Yisrael, and how it could be that these cults, that's what they often did. They would infiltrate into various holy places to undermine them, and that's really. And maybe it was a blackmail thing. That's why they were the Shomer here. Maybe they were tough guys. Maybe they were violent people. I don't know. I have to look into the history more of the Schumer family, if they were indeed from the Sabbatean Frankists. And mark my word, I really think that Chuck Schumer is going to want to run for president in 4 years. Nobody else is saying this, but I think this is the last blow. Like they said, the Satan, before Mashiach comes, they try one big, these things are true, we have a lot what to worry about here. But we should be united with Christians in this shared values, and really with moderate Muslims. Even though this particular fellow on Twitter probably doesn't feel comfortable with that, but I think we can have a coalition of Orthodox Jews, conservative and middle-of-the-road Christians, and moderate Muslims. Not the extreme liberals, which are very rare. You have the Mashad of progressive values and things like that, which are very small groups, but there are, just mainstream, moderate, everyday American Muslims that we should be united with 100%. And the average American pious Muslim who prays 5 times a day, eats halal, we should have total brotherhood. And even those who are a little bit more liberal and not as pious, for sure, because those almost certainly are not, terrorists and not supporting that. Maybe they're strong-armed and bullied into a certain level of support, but there is a tremendous opportunity to build bridges between these, but also to fight these common enemies of and even it's been found that the Rothschild family, not Rav Anshel, he was an heir L'chid, but the families that they married into, and their children, and what it is today, are all part of these cults, and they have nothing to do with us, and we should have nothing to do with them. And we shouldn't see it as anti-Semitic when people on the internet and so forth talk about the Rothschilds and this and that. They're 100% right. I'm not talking about Rav Anshel as given a vorli l'chayra. Maybe yes, maybe not. I don't know. The first, the Zeta, but the families that they married into were overwhelmingly the Frankists and 17 cold people. So that's why we have to be together and not antagonize Christians and really be. That's why I said this particular missionary of a Jewish background should just forget about the Jewish thing. If he's not going to be frum, he should just embrace Christianity. That would be better than this hodgepodge that he's in now. I'm not saying that's the ideal, I'm just talking realistically. But on the other hand, the vast majority of Gentiles who come to these Messianic places are not doing so. There are people who just want to convert Jews, and they should want to convert Jews. If they really believe that their religion is true, they should want everybody to join it. I don't forgive them that. If this has made their life so much better, of course they should want that. Of course they should want to share that. They're not being selfish. They're not keeping their religion to themselves. I disagree. I have a different religion. But we shouldn't forgive them this, that they want to share their faith with other people. And if anything, we should say the people who don't want to share their faith are anti-Semites because they don't think we're good enough. We don't deserve to have their faith. That's really... although on the other hand, I understand, of course, it's not true. They're not anti-Semitic. Maybe there were roots of that in the past, but now that's largely been overcome, and there is mutual respect, and it's a whole different world now in the interfaith world. But Jews should be more welcoming of Gentiles who are seeking out Judaism. Of course, there's a fear: are they missionaries? Are they trying to? But the thing is, don't just push them away. Show them the light. Show them the truth. Don't be afraid to share the light of Torah. We are sent into exile to be a light to the nations. That doesn't mean and we were sent into exile proselytes. That doesn't mean everyone is going to convert to Judaism right away. Although the Gemara does say that when Mashiach comes, Kulam Gerim Purim, everyone's going to be a ger when Mashiach comes. So maybe that means that there'll be Geri Toshav. Some will be Geri Toshav and some will be Geri Tzedek. I don't know which is going to be more, which is going to be less. I don't know. And then you say Gadata, but there are so many people, like I said, like this fellow in Idaho Falls. He went to Asia Torah. He said he wants to learn Torah. They said, "Are you Jewish?" He said, "Well, my father's father was Jewish." They said, "Well, since your mother's not Jewish, we're not gonna help you." And taking that approach has turned this man into who would have probably become a full Ger Tzedek and dropped all the Avodah Zarah, turned him into a missionary who's going after Jews. But this guy is, with his ideology, he's not really, he's what my friend Rabbi Mesa would call a real Messianic Jew, meaning he's really practicing Judaism in a sense, not fully halachically 100%, but he's trying his best because he really believes that not only that he truly believes that rabbinical law applies, because it says in Christian Bible, Jesus said that he describes the Pharisees when they sit in the seat of Moses. He goes on to criticize the Pharisees as the rabbis do in the Talmud, as we discussed before. And so this person feels the problem with that is that Christianity developed into a different religion. Paul warned against Judaizing. So do you throw out the epistles of Paul? How do you balance those two things? Because Paul obviously, although Paul, he said he was a Pharisee among Pharisees, and he still, even as a follower of Jesus, called himself a Pharisee. Whether he was doing so facetiously, honestly, it's hard to say. But there is what they could. It's complicated because the whole thing is nonsense. That's just how it is. He can't. The Christian books that they call the New Testament are not one cohesive body the way that our Tanakh is. Even though the Tanakh isn't one cohesive body, the Torah is one cohesive body, and then each of the other books is a book by itself, but they have to fit within the framework of Torah, meaning the Christians see, I was reading this morning, Billy Graham, he has questions and answers every day, and someone asked him today in today's email, they asked him, I have a hard time reading the Bible. They said they made a New Year's resolution to read the Bible, and they're starting from Genesis, and they just can't make it through. And then Billy Graham said, because you're doing it wrong. You shouldn't start from Genesis. You should start from one of the Gospels. And he always, as many missionaries do, he suggests John, which is the most anti-Semitic gospel, or the one that's been used for anti-Semitism the most, even though it does mention Hanukkah there. And also the weirdest of the three Gospels. The Jesus of John is a totally different character than the three synoptic Gospels. He's almost like an alien, like an extraterrestrial being. He pops up out of nowhere, and it's a weird. It's definitely the weirder of the four presentations. But he said, read one of the Gospels first, and then you go back and read the rest. Because, he wants people to read the Bible through Jesus-colored glasses, which is not what it's meant to be. These books were not written. There's nothing, absolutely nothing in our Tanakh, in the books that the Christians call the Old Testament, about Jesus. Absolutely nothing, except maybe the passages of the false prophet in Deuteronomy 13, and in Zechariah he talks about the false prophet who had wounds in his hands. That one's pretty clear that it probably is talking about Jesus. But that was talking about a false prophet, and missionaries use that. I mean, Tovia Singer, he's incredulous. He had to play a recording of a missionary quoting this passage, and then read the whole passage in context. It's pretty funny. Again, I don't mean this to be disrespectful to Christians, because I love my Christian neighbors and I think we should unite, and I don't seek to change them. Just like Donald Trump said to the Saudis, we're not here to change your way of life. And the same thing, I'm not looking to any Christian who's happy with Christianity to take him away from Christianity and make him be a Noahide or make him become Jewish. Certainly not to make him a Noahide. That's just silly. But not even to make him be Jewish. The way I see Noahide is, if you can't handle keeping Shabbos yet, keeping kosher yet, have conversion to Judaism as a goal, but hold on to this until you're ready to do that. That's the approach that I was taught in yeshiva. Even though I asked my yeshiva, why does everybody else say different? He said, ask everybody else, don't ask me. But it's true, and he brings strong arguments for that. But wow, I've gone on for an hour already. I missed the first half hour of Glenn Beck, but I'm almost to work. So I'm not trying to be a missionary to change Christians. Not out of and again, like I said, so the missionaries the Christians who don't go after Jews, are they anti-Semitic? But really not. It's a mutual respect, and it's an understanding that we live in an imperfect world. When the real Messiah comes, will as long as, like Rabbi Bar Tzadok said to what's that guy who always talks about eschatology? He wrote The Late Great Planet Earth. What's that guy's name? Can't think of his name now. He's a big missionary with eschatology. He's pretty entertaining to watch also. He met Rabbi Bar Tzadok met him, and he said he started talking to him about Jesus and this and that, and Rabbi Bar Tzadok said, I don't care if I'm right or you're right, as long as when it happens, if it's a first coming or a second coming, we can both hold hands and go say, blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord. And that's the truth. We don't know for sure anything. We have our beliefs. We have our very strong apologetics. But like Rabbi Meza says, at best, we're hopeful agnostics. We can't be 100% sure of anything. Actually, I have some extra time. I could sit at work and for 15 minutes and make this video even longer, actually. But it's the same thing. My feeling to my Christian neighbors, brothers and sisters, really, and my Muslim neighbors, brothers and sisters, and really my Buddhist and Hindu and atheist and agnostic neighbors, brothers and sisters, or at least cousins. If maybe it's my fellow Orthodox Jews who are my brothers and sisters, and everybody else is just cousins. But we're still neighbors, and we still all got to get along. We should have this understanding that the world is not perfect yet. If you're a Christian, you believe there's going to be a second coming. Didn't happen yet. Until then, although I remember the story Rabbi Weinberger tells about Rev Soloveitchik with the cardinal there in Boston. The cardinal saying, he thought his days are numbered, and he's like, I can't wait to find out, were we right or were you right? And like Rav Soloveitchik said, I can't imagine. You dedicate your whole life to this with the celibacy and all this, and the scholarship, and this man was one step away from being the Pope, and he still has a doubt that maybe the Jews are right. And and Rabbi Soloveitchik said, you ask the simplest Jew in Brisk, and he would ask, do you think maybe they're right? And he would spit. He said, no, of course not. Why would you even ask a question like that? And so Rabbi Soloveitchik said he lost all respect for him at that time, for the cardinal. I don't remember his name. A very great scholar, one of the leading Catholic scholars in the 20th century. And Rabbi Soloveitchik said Rabbi Weinberger said he remembers Rabbi Soloveitchik saying this over in yeshiva at YU. But the thing is, I really don't have much of a doubt that my religion is true. But I have enough respect, on the other hand, to be respectful of other religions and see the good that the other religions have brought to the world. And ultimately, like the Rambam says, this is, according to our beliefs, will culminate into what we're waiting for. But that being said, I can still honestly and fully say that I don't care if I'm right or they're right. That doesn't bother me. Meaning, if somehow I was wrong, I don't doubt. I believe that my faith is the true faith, but I wouldn't lose my mind if they were right. It really wouldn't even affect my religion. I would still be 100% Jewish. Meaning, when I say if I'm right or they're right, meaning if, and I don't believe this, I don't even have a doubt that this could possibly be true, but if somehow it was that when the Messiah comes, it's the second coming of their person, that wouldn't change my religion in the least bit, because he was Jewish, and he was an Orthodox Jew. He was a rabbinical Jew. As was Paul. And so all of the, meaning when I say there's no doubt, meaning there's no doubt that the whole new theology that was invented is not true. The theology that was invented over the years and all the different denominations, there's no doubt to me that that's not true. And really there's no doubt to me that the Messiah that's coming is not their Messiah. But if it was, it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't change anything. And I would be just as happy. I would not be in the least bit sad. But I don't doubt that it's not true. So in that way, that's like what Rabbi Bar Tzadok said. We can, as long as we can both hold hands and say, "Blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord." The same thing. If Lubavitcher Rebbe turns out to be Mashiach, I'll be very happy. That's what I remember Shadlovtzer Rebbe said. He said, if he turns out to be Mashiach, I'll be very, very happy. Because, but most likely not, And I really don't have much of a doubt of that either. If anything, it's more like Rabbi Victor Miller says, every Rebbe and every Rosh Hashiva and every rabbi is a little bit Mashiach, and every human being can have a shtickle Mashiach in them. But back to what I was saying from the beginning. How do we solve this missionary problem? Really, is by being more welcoming of people, by not tossing away Timnah and creating a Molech, like the Medrash. By being welcoming My experience had many people come to me that want to be Gerim. And most of them just, I'm saying that I've learned with. I don't mean that I send a bezdin that someone else put together. But most people, after learning, they decide it's not for them. That's also fine. It's a little sad. And some people, oh, we shouldn't be sad. No, we should be sad. I'm sorry. And maybe much of it sometimes has been my fault, maybe because I pushed away too much, although I didn't push away as much as other rabbis did. But that I never did. I always said, come learn with us. But often I'd be surprised. Hashem has his plans. People who I thought for sure would be the best Gerei Tzedek gave up. And people who I was not so sure about, but I brought them to very choshev batei din. They made it, and they're still frum. So, and they had their problems and their issues, but they're still frum. That's another thing. I remember one person who I had made a ger. They were going through a difficult time in their life, and they wound up driving on Yom Kippur to shul. And then someone else asked, well, are they? Is this person still Jewish? If they did, yes, they're still Jewish. Same thing. People are asking, oh, I mean, Ivanka Trump. She asked the Rav. She's not telling who the Rav is. She asked the Rav if she could fly on Shabbos. She's leaving before Shabbos, arriving after Shabbos, and some idiot on Vus's Nice said, "Oh, is she? So is she really Jewish? Of course she's really Jewish. What kind of stupid? Do you know Shulchan Aruch? Do you know the halacha at all? You're trying to. Do you know just basics of Judaism? I don't know. It's sick. This hatred is so sick. We have to be embracing and loving. I don't know, and so if we were more embracing, more loving, more accepting, but that's the problem. Meaning that those very same rabbis who are crying about missionaries instead of trying to find fellowship with them the way that I always have, to talk to them as human beings, not see them as enemy. I remember a missionary came up to me. He said, well, am I the enemy? I said, no, you're not the enemy. And like he said, he sat with the Orthodox rabbi in his community, and he said, that he sat and talked to him for hours, and then the rabbi told him, he said, it's so nice to find someone who's interested in talking Torah instead of the people at shul who just want to daven and get it over with. And if we could find ways of fellowship, that missionary problem will go away. I think that's why we have the missionary problem. The problem that these rabbis are so upset about, they're quite often the cause because they don't want to engage them. They don't want to be makar of them. They don't want to find fellowship with them. And because of that, and the selfishness, this, light to my nation instead of light to the nations attitude, has really created this problem. The rabbis often are their worst enemies. Especially the ones who have like the edifice complex. As my Rav often is wont to quote, and is that they care about their building, their nice fancy temples, but they have nothing in them. Like we said that the Mishkan, Rabbi Fishbane, my Rav here in White Lake, he always says, I think it's from the Al-Sheikh HaKadosh, one of the Rishonim, I don't remember, the Al-Sheikh HaKadosh was a little bit later, or maybe it was the Ramban, I don't remember. He said that the Mishkan had the greatest Hashras Shechina, and it was just curtains. And the first base of Migdash, sometimes had Hashras Shechina, sometimes didn't. And it was a magnificent structure. And then the second base of Migdash was the most magnificent, beautiful structure, especially when Herod, remade it, but never had Hashras Shechina. And there's this story that was on the PBS special about the Jews, that the Dalai Lama asked a bunch of rabbis to come teach him the secrets of surviving in exile. And at the end he said that if they spent a week with him in fellowship, and they at the end he said any questions or requests or anything, and one young Orthodox rabbi got up, had the chutzpah, as it's the kedusha, he did the exact right thing. He said, a lot of Jews come here, can you send them home? And all the Reform and conservative liberal rabbis were shocked. How could he have the chutzpah say that? And the Dalai Lama said, don't be shocked. I do send them home. They're Jews. They belong. That's where they belong. But if you don't give them what they're looking for in Judaism, and there's plenty what to give, they're just going to wind up back here. And in a way, sometimes these rabbis are their own worst enemies. But I've been there. I know why they're their own worst enemies. It's because of the congregations. It's because of the pressures. It's not easy being a rabbi. Someone said it's not a job for a Jewish boy to be a rabbi. Better to go make your living as a plumber than as a rav of a shul. I'm very happy that I make my living as a rabbi, but as a chaplain, not as a congregational rabbi. I would love to have my own congregation. I serve as assistant rabbi in my local congregation, but I have a strong desire to open my own congregation. But like the dean said at my college, Rabbi Dr. Moshe Sokol, the advice he gave me was, have your parnasa somewhere else and have your congregation be totally independent. And that's very wise, because that, like Rav Victor Miller said, you're trying to bribe me. When my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Lazarus, he was on the board there at the shul in Young Israel Rugby, and he offered Rabbi Miller a raise, and he said, don't try to bribe me, Shoichad, it's nice, nice to not have to make your living as a rav, but you can make a living as a rabbi, as a chaplain, wedding officiant, those type of things, dealing with the community, and make a living that way, and it's a nice, clean living also. All right, God bless you. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. If you made it this long, I applaud you. An hour and 14 minutes. All right. God bless you. I got to go to work. All right. Now I know what I'm going to talk about at work. All right. Take care. Thank you.